We think we have to strip our humanity away in order to be these perfect, respectful parents. And that's not real. And that's not what our kids want either. Our kids want real, authentic connection.
Welcome to the Connect Method Parenting Podcast, where correction is out, connection is in, and your kids want to listen to you. I'm Andy Martineau, creator of Connect Method Parenting, here to help you stay calm, confident, and connected no matter what.
Hello, I'm Dr. Laura Froyen, and I host the Balanced Parent Podcast. I'm so excited to be talking about this topic with you, Andy. So my background is I have a PhD in human development and family studies with a specialization in marriage and family therapy. And I really love coming alongside families and helping them parent in the way that feels really good to them, really aligned with their values, and focus on connection. And I feel like you're the same, Andy. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
I will. I'm so excited for this conversation because as we were chatting before we hit record, there's like, we were like, what do we want to talk? There's so many things we could talk about. And the cool thing is how aligned we are on our purpose and mission. So I'll just briefly introduce, I'm so excited that we're going to get this on both of our podcasts, but my name's Andy Martineau and I have 6 kids and I'm very passionate about sharing an approach to parenting that's based in developmental psychology, that's based in attachment theory, that honors emotions and just really helps us understand what it takes to be in a relationship with our child and with ourselves, to be honest, where our nervous systems are regulated and our kids are more open to what we have to say, to the feedback we have. I have lots of teenagers and adult kids now. And so that's important all throughout, but especially as they're getting to be more independent, to have that relationship. And so of honesty, of openness. So I'm so excited. We're going to talk about like the things we're going to dive into today are going to be really pertinent. If you're parenting and you're feeling resistance and you're feeling a lot of frustration, we both understand, we both get you. And we're going to dive into that because that's something that can be really hard as a parent. So
I'm sure you hear the same thing, but I hear from parents all the time that they really want to be respectful, compassionate, conscious parents. And they want their kids to listen to them. They want to feel heard and respected themselves as adults. And it's really hard. It's so easy to say you're committed to something, and then the putting it into practice is so much different because you're dealing with another human being. And one of the things that I think you can tell me if you've experienced it too, that the kind of the peaceful parenting and respectful parenting world, it gives this impression that peaceful parents or respectful parents are always this kind of even keel. They have this sweet voice. Oh, my darling, and in my experience, lots of parents think that they're regulating, and in reality, they're stuffing. They're kind of gritting their teeth through the hard moments. They're kind of white knuckling it through, and they're not actually regulating their nervous systems and learning how do I actually deal with the moments that are challenging and hard so that I don't yell. And when we white knuckle through it, we eventually hit that threshold where we revert to our old patterns, the patterns that were uploaded into our nervous system when we were younger.
Yes.
We start yelling, our mom's voice falls out of our mouths, and so I guess I'm so excited to talk about that with you. Yeah. So that's my theory, that why not yelling is so hard is because we are in resistance so much. What do you think about that?
To the emotions, exactly. Well, if your nervous system is activated and you're trying to put on the calm parent front, there's a huge disconnect. I've even had people tell me, no, I didn't raise my voice. I was smiling. And I said, well, how did you feel? Irate, annoyed, frustrated? And I totally get it because I've completely been there before, where I'm trying so hard to be the parent I want to be, not understanding that I can't hide my internal fury. I'm trying to, but my kids map it. Our kids
know, they can see it.
Exactly. I mean, you hear mirror neurons, that are sending out this, I think of it as a radio signal saying, I'm really upset inside, and even though the facade might be what I like to call a stretchy smile, which is us doing our best, the kids feel the emotion that's being transmitted and they pick it up with their mirror neurons and you can't hide it. So I love talking about really what's the core issue. It's like if an
Yeah.
apple tree wasn't producing apples, we would look at the roots and we would treat the roots and water, fertilizer, that kind of thing. We wouldn't look at the fruit and say, let's put some ointment on the apple. That's not going to cause the change, right? That's not really the problem. And so I think going to the emotions, going to the nervous system and seeing what's happening, that's how you get to a place where you are showing up more intentionally. And I loved your point of portraying an image of just this sweet, calm, which I'm, as you can hear by my intensity in my voice, I'm a very intense person. So like that was really, I wanted that so bad. I had a couple of friends that felt like they could just, never raise their voice above a whisper hardly. And I thought that was amazing. And that I tried to be that for a while. That's not me. And if that is you, that's amazing. But regardless of how we are, accepting who we are, accepting our emotional capacity. And it's not about necessarily always being perfect or even not, even if we show up in a way where we do let some of that frustration get out, it's about learning how to process and take care of what was at the root of it so you can do better next time.
Yeah. I mean, because Andy, we parents are humans. We get to be human, and yeah. I think that sometimes we think we have to strip our humanity away in order to be these perfect, respectful parents. And that's not real. And that's not what our kids want either. Our kids want real, authentic connection. Of course, they shouldn't be burdened with our kind of emotions. Of course, we need to be taking care of ourselves, going to our friends, a partner, a therapist, if we need to do some work. But they need to know there needs to be congruence between what we are expressing on the outside and the kind of what they're picking up. And yes. They can tell when we're faking it. They really can, and from an attachment perspective, a biological perspective, they're primed to always kind of be on the lookout for what's going on with mom, because that's how they survive.
Exactly.
That is just biology, our human animal nature. And so being congruent and being authentic is really important. So I'm thinking about then the parents who are in these moments where they're feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, they feel like their kids aren't listening, and they've tried to be nice, and they feel like the only thing they can do at that moment in time is to do what we know works in the short term. Threats, bribes, punishments, timeouts, those things do work in the short term.
They do.
Right? They do. They
yes.
get compliance when that's what we're looking for. They don't work in the long term. There's 40, 60 years of like solid research telling us that they don't work in the long run. But they do work in the immediate moment. You use that word acceptance. I feel like that's the first step. Well, first step is awareness that something's happening, right? We always talk about that, right? The first step is awareness. Okay, we're aware. I guarantee the parents listening, they're aware. Something's happening.
Yes.
And lots of us, I know for me personally, just as an example to tell a personal story, I was on vacation for my 40th birthday. We were in Florida and
Happy
we were
birthday.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I feel so excited about being in my 40s.
Me too. I love my 40s.
I'm so excited about it. I feel like I'm like at this level where I can just like be me. I don't know. I'm loving. I've been in my 40s for like a week, but I really love it.
Welcome to the 40s.
Yay. Anyway, we were at a beach in Florida that is just really famous for seashells. And one of my daughters found a really nice big seashell. And my other daughter did not. And there were all of these feelings about it. This was on my birthday. And I had so much resistance to what was happening for both of my kids. I had one kid who was super excited, wanting to call grandma and grandpa, tell her about the seashell. And the other kid who was losing it. I never find anything, just had the whole negative narrative going. And then I was in my own mind having my own negative narrative. It really made me think about your book, and you have these 6 acceptance questions. So can we talk about those for a few minutes? Just about what acceptance is, why resistance was so painful for me, why it caused a lot of problems, and what I could have done instead.
If you're new to Connect Method Parenting, I have a great way for you to get started. I created a free course that covers some of the biggest challenges parents are facing and how Connect Method Parenting solves them. In an hour, we're going to talk about why parenting is so hard, how to get your kids to want to listen to you, how to stop yelling and losing your cool, and become that calm, confident, connected parent for good. It's the fastest way to get started using connection as your go-to tool for influencing and impacting your kids. Go to cmp.works/course to get instant access today. Yeah. Oh, goodness. I could tell my own version of that story.
We all have them, right?
Yes. Before we go into the questions, I just want to say, being willing to say, hey, I'm a human and I feel the same emotions that everybody else feels. I think with parenting, sometimes we feel shameful or because there's so much pressure to get it perfect that we're afraid to admit that we aren't getting it right all the time. So I love that we're sharing authentically because hopefully it will help other people also be willing to share and realize there's nothing wrong, right? If you resist.
Right. There's something quite right about this. We're human. It's happening for a reason. And it makes sense that all of this is happening for us. I think that there are people who like learn about peaceful parenting or respectful parenting and are like, oh, that makes sense. Like, whoop, and are done and go on their merry way. That is not my truth. That is not, this is like, I'm so lucky I get to do this for my job because it's a daily like reaffirmation of the work I'm doing. But anyway, yes. Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So I love that we're being vulnerable. And that's that allows the awareness that then allows us to go into the next step, one of the next steps, which is acceptance, which is a process to me of regulating our nervous system. So I think when we're in resistance, we're in that fight or flight. That's typically the terms we call it. There's fawn freeze, there's the other ones, but like, we're in this nervous system activated place. And from that place, we're going to try to do the tug of war, do the fix it, do the change.
The thought is this should not be happening.
Yes.
That's the thought that comes in my mind. This should not be happening. She should not be doing this. I should not be feeling this. Like I just start, this should not be happening, everything.
Yeah. Yes. And when you have the word should, I'm so aware of that word now. And I'm like, wait, like, ding, ding, ding. Like, let me look at that a little bit more because I need to inspect if that is accurate. And most of the time, it's not helpful. Like when I'm using the word should, it's usually not helpful. So I'm so glad you said that. So that some version of this should not be happening. They should know better.
They should be able to do this by now.
Yeah. My kids shouldn't be fighting or having, problems with the,
she should be happy for her sister. She shouldn't be bragging.
Exactly. I shouldn't be so frustrated. I should be handling this better.
I should accept her emotions.
Right. Or if I was a better mom, I should be able to prevent this from happening or whatever. Right. We have all of these.
And so those are all resistance, right?
Yes. Examples of resistance. And when you go into resistance, you go into an activated nervous system. And I love just saying it's your nervous system. There's nothing wrong with you. Of course you want to protect yourself. This is survival. This is how humans have survived. We just think that the girls having the seashell dilemma is life or death. Like that's what our brain thinks. And it's not a tiger about to eat us. It's really not.
Yeah. Can we just dig into like the narrative there that happens for so many of us? Because it's not even about for protecting ourselves. For me, when I know I get triggered in this certain way, it's about a fear of my kids becoming unlovable. And it is deeply important as a human animal parent that our kids be lovable and acceptable in society because we know that that's what keeps them safe. That is a human imperative. It's written into our DNA. We cannot help it, right? That it's there, that our nervous system reacts to that fear of they're doing something that's going to get them rejected. That's going to cause them to lose love. So it just makes sense that that would be cause a reaction within us, right?
Yes. And I wanted to say that because if you have that awareness that this is fine, this makes sense. Of course, my nervous system is reacting this way. Of course, my girls' nervous systems are reacting this way. That is leading you into acceptance, right? Because now what I'm doing, instead of fighting against the reality that I have in that moment, I'm saying, okay, I can at least accept where I am. I'm not trying to change anything at this moment, right? I'm just saying, this is my reality.
This is reality.
This is reality. And when we fight against reality, we lose 100% of the time, right? Like There is no way in the moment when it's happening, and I'm not saying talking about 5 minutes before or 5 minutes after, in the moment when the girls are having to think about the seashell, and I could share my own version, but since you shared yours, we'll just use it. So
Let's
it's
use my
continuity here.
example. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're having your experience. It's like, this is the best we can all do right now. This is what's happening. This is what our nervous systems are doing. And if you can go into that versus I should be different, my curls should be different, and you're just either upset at yourself or upset at the girls or both and all, right? Like, this is ruining my birthday. This is not how I want to feel, blah, 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 right? They're going to live
Were
on the
you
street.
there
Nobody's
in
going
my
to
head?
ever. It's almost like I was, because I have my exact version of this. My brain likes to catastrophize. Like, they're not going to share. They're not going to be cooperative. They're not going to have friends. They're not going
The
to
rest
be
of the
successful
vacation
at
is going to be,
college.
yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm going 20 years in the future.
So that's one thing that acceptance does, is it pulls you back into the here and now too.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. This moment.
Can I ask you a question? So I feel like acceptance gets a bad rap in a lot of places. It feels like inaction. It feels like we're just going to let this happen because it's happening and we're letting it happen. Feels kind of like the walking all over the doormat type of vibe. And it's not that. It's actually quite an active process to be radically accepting of someone or of a situation. It doesn't mean that we think those things are all okay either. In this circumstance, when my kids weren't hurting each other, but if there was a hit or something that happened, of course it wouldn't be okay that one kid hit the other kid.
Right.
It's still reality. It's still what happened.
Still the truth.
It's still the truth.
You can either accept it or not, right? It's still
right.
Like, am I going to accept it and have my nervous system start to calm down so I can use my prefrontal cortex and make wise decisions? Or am I going to stay in resistance and wish things were different, which causes my thinking brain to turn off and I go, straight into reactionary mode, which I'm not proud of. And I love what you brought up with acceptance. I've heard the same exact thing. They think it's passive and they think acceptance means condoning. And it's not. It's not. I'm not saying, oh yeah, I'm so glad they're fighting and I'm so glad. No. It's not that at all. So acceptance just means seeing what's happening in front of you and saying, this is what is.
This is what is. You have some questions in your book. Your book is called Connect Method Parenting. And you have some questions in it that I really liked, because I feel like sometimes people are, when we get the advice to just accept what's happening, accept what is, we don't actually get any information. Okay, so what does that look like and how, please? And I really love the questions that are in your book. Can we go over them a little bit?
Yeah, let's go through them. Yeah. So the first one, and in my book, I'm telling about a scenario, and then I use the questions to kind of walk through the process I went through. So I guess I will just apply them to the situation you proposed.
Please.
They're universal. They're universal. So how does and I said he is saying, make perfect sense to him, but what she's doing, how I'm feeling, how does it make perfect sense to your let's start with your children. So how does what they're saying and doing make perfect sense to them?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it makes perfect sense that my one child who found the seashell would be really excited about it. It was a really lovely specimen. It was the biggest one we found our whole trip, basically. It was something we'd been talking about for months leading up. Of course, she was going to be excited about that. And she had no ill intentions in being excited. She was just fully embodying her own emotional experience. And for my other child, same. We had been talking about this trip for a long time, thinking about whether we would find a big seashell or not. She desperately wanted to find one, and her sister found one instead. And of course, she felt jealous. Of course, she felt sad. Of course, she wondered if there was something that she was doing wrong because she didn't find it, because she was right there too. I mean, of course, it makes so much sense. She was having all of those negative thoughts. And it makes so much sense that I would be having the thoughts that I was having too.
Right.
It makes so much sense that I would feel frustrated and annoyed and wish that my kids could just let it go. I wish that one didn't have to be quite so exuberant, and and that the other one didn't have to be quite so sad. And of course that all makes sense that I would feel that way, because it was we feel our kids' stuff too. We often take that stuff on even when we know it's theirs. And Yeah. So, I mean, that makes some, I
It
mean,
makes
just
so
even
much
saying
sense.
those things, I feel so much better.
Yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. It gives us perspective on all the things going on in the moment. And the next couple of questions you've already answered. Like I talk about why did they feel, there were two children involved in mine too. So it's like, what
Mhm.
did he feel? What did she feel? So that's what the next couple are. And you already answered all of those
Yeah. So the next couple
beautifully.
questions, so just to read them are, what
Yeah.
are their words or actions telling me? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I love that question. So, I mean,
Yeah.
those two questions are something I do kind of automatically at this point for myself. So, I think
Mm-hmm.
what's important for our listeners to know is that this doesn't stop. There is not some magical time, at least not for me, where I won't have to do this. I will be doing this work for the rest of my life. And I've come to accept that,
Yeah, me
that
ditto to what you're
truth.
saying. It
Yeah.
is the work.
You
It's
know,
like anytime you're going to train to run a marathon, you'd have to train to run the marathon. If you're going to run marathon after marathon, right? You can't just stop training just because you
like,
did it once, right? Like
exactly,
it's
right?
lifelong work. Yeah.
Yes, it's lifelong work. And so, like, those two things, those first two questions are really good habits for me right by now. When I start feeling that kind of dysregulated, panicky feeling of like, this is
Mm-hmm.
not happening the way I thought it was going to, I know to ask myself those two questions. They're
Yeah.
habit. But I love your next question. So, your next one is, what's the best thing I can do right now for them and me? And that is a question on that beach that morning. I did not ask myself that question. I
So
did
if
not.
you could, what would you say now?
What the best thing that would have been like the best thing for me to do would have been for me to walk ahead and regulate myself. Breathe.
Mm,
So the ocean is a mindful place for me. There's something about the repetition, the sound, the rhythm of the waves and stuff that is really good for my nervous system. The best thing for me to do in that moment would have been to kind of say, all right, I'm going to walk this way for a few minutes by myself. Go do that, drop into the present moment, get into my body, get back into regulation. While my husband, who does not get triggered by this sort of thing, dealt with the kids. That's what the
mm.
best thing I should have done. I did not do that, but I wish I had.
The reason I wanted to ask is because even if you discover that in hindsight, every time we have that awareness, it helps you
Mhm.
next time.
Exactly.
It will
Yeah.
serve you to have the awareness. So I love that.
Perfect. Yeah.
Always regulate ourselves if we can.
Right.
Safety first, if separate if there's safety issues, and then yeah, take care of ourselves. I love that. So good.
The next two questions are, what am I making this mean about me and why? And what am
Mm-hmm.
I making this mean about them and why? Those questions are really helpful. I find those questions challenging for lots of people to answer. Do you find the same thing, Andy?
I do. I do. I found it challenging for me to answer at first too, when I
Mm-hmm.
started really having the the ability to even answer the questions. It was like, oh my gosh. Yeah. So what is the most challenging part that you find with people when you're asking them those questions or when, yeah, that's coming up?
Yeah, I think for the folks that I talk to, the story has been playing in the background of their mind, kind of subconsciously for so long that they're not
Mm-hmm.
aware of it. And these stories, what am I making this mean? There's usually a consistent narrative. The circumstances might change, the characters might change, but the story is kind of the same. Like, I'm a mess up, I don't do anything right. There's some kind of consistency to the narrative. And we're so used to that narrative being in the background. It's this background noise that we just don't even notice anymore. And so learning to quiet and tune into it is hard. But the way I ask my clients often is, what are you telling yourself? What are you saying to yourself? What are the thoughts that are rolling through your head, the storm of thoughts that are just flowing in your brain? What are they saying? And once I can get a client to start saying those things out loud, that's when we find the narrative. What about you, Andy?
So powerful. It's super similar to what you're saying. It's fascinating because sometimes it's not that the story is inaccessible. They've just never realized
That it's happening.
that it's happening, just like
Yeah.
what you were saying. So it's surprising to them how negative. And I will say for most women, they don't have a problem making it feel something terrible about themselves. They're really comfortable being a failure and having like beating themselves up, which is really a whole nother topic we could talk about.
Oh,
But, like a lot of women are hard on themselves. They think that's necessary or even useful. I don't think either of those are the case. Like that's not necessary or useful or helpful. But what's interesting is when they realize what they're making it mean about their kids, that their kids are a failure, that their kids are rude or mean, and we start to talk about it, they realize how they do not want to have that story about their children. And that even if they feel like they have the evidence for it, they want to untangle that and they want to believe something different. Because when you start to talk and you have the awareness, you want to create something new. And when we start to see, like, if I am believing this child is rude, for instance, that's the filter I'm looking through. So I'm going to keep finding evidence for that in my life. And so I want to clean it up. And so once we start untangling and unpacking not just the story, but the impact it's having on their life and the impact it's going to continue to have on them, they want to let it go. So that's my experience, and super powerful questions. I find myself asking myself this often, like, what am I making that mean about them? And is it true? And can I know it's true? And what if it's not true? What if it's just that? Because I'd love to say, what if it's just that their nervous system is activated? What if they're just struggling today? What if the truth is they're just having a lot of hurt emotions that haven't filtered through, and it's just coming out on it as an attack on me because I'm a safe person to purge. Like when you start to see it from that perspective, it's like, oh, I can release this judgmental story I have about them, and now I have compassion.
Yeah. And so I like asking what could also be true,
That's good.
So I have the joy of getting to run a play group on Mondays with babies. It's so much fun. And one of the moms was there with her 3-year-old and her 3-month-old. And the 3-year-old was helping me clean up. The other kids were all a little young to be really helping with the cleanup, but the 3-year-old was helping. And he kept, listen to the language I'm about to use. He kept snatching toys away from the babies to put into my play bin box. Listen to that language, snatching. That's the lens. That's the interpretation. It looked like he was doing those things. And the mom was so anxious about it. I don't know why he's doing that. He shouldn't take from the babies. And I was like, wait, hold on. Let's just everybody take a second to reframe what's happening for this 3-year-old. This 3-year-old saw me, his teacher, doing cleanup and wanted to help. This child is being helpful. He is not snatching anything. He's helping these children release the toys and put them in the box. And that meant that lens shift is super important. And I feel like that's what acceptance does. It helps us step into a place where we can shift our lenses. Culture, society, they gave us these lenses to look at our children through, to look at ourselves through. We don't have to keep them on, right?
Yeah.
And acceptance allows us to see the lens, like to have it come in focus, like, oh, wait, I'm wearing that lens again. Let's take this off and remember which lens I'm choosing to see my kids through.
Beautiful. I love that example. It's just, yes, exactly what you said. It's so true that the lens affects how we see things, and it's not personal. Like the mom was interpreting it that way just because of the lens she was wearing. It was nothing. Like all she has to do is switch the lenses. There was nothing wrong with her either. There's nothing wrong with her.
No,
there's nothing wrong with her or the child.
She's a conscious, aware mom who wants her child to be perceived well in this setting. It was one of her, second times coming, so she's kind of new. She wanted the community of parents to think well of her. I mean, all good things, all things that make sense. Yeah. And they impact us. They impact how we show up with our kids. And they're not going anywhere. They're going to be there. Culture is going to be there. We're all swimming around in this culture soup, and it's not our fault and it's not going anywhere. It's just our job to be aware of it.
Yeah. So good.
And raise kids who are aware of it too. What's beautiful about a process like this is that this is also something that you can start modeling for your kids and give your kids the opportunity to start practicing these things too.
Yeah, exactly. I used to have a 3x5 card in my back pocket because I'm in my 40s. So I didn't always have my cell phone handy, and we had cell phones, but they weren't smart cell phones, and I'd have my questions written out, so if I started to feel the resistance, I had my little questions. Okay. And I would go through similar questions to these to help me navigate tricky situations. And you're right on. Like it helps the kids see how to handle situations, and how to respond. I also love that if at the end of the questions, you're not ready to fully accept, or you still want to have a little bit of resistance, that's okay too. Just consciously do it and give yourself enough space and time and permission to allow your nervous system to regulate when it's ready. You can't force the process. So
Yeah. Oh, I love
it
that,
just
Andy.
takes as much time as, so even accepting the resistance that I might have, the residue of it, it just takes the amount of time that it takes. And it's beautiful to even just be able to say, no, I can't accept this right now, but I'm working on it. I can accept
Yeah.
the fact that I'm working on it and I'm still
Yeah.
resisting.
Yeah.
That's beautiful too.
Okay. So I feel like when you say that, like, I can't accept this, there's this phrase in parenting that we heard
Oh,
ourselves.
yeah.
This is unacceptable behavior. And so I feel like the need to kind of pull that up as a contrast, like
Yes.
I'm thinking about like, okay, so siblings hitting each other. Yes, we don't want them hitting each other. So what do you mean it like when you say, can I accept this? Are you saying, can I, you're not like, let's really piece out the condone and the accept. Can we really like pull that apart?
Yeah. So specifically when I said I can't accept that, I was not talking about the behavior necessarily of the kids. I was talking specifically of an introspective question of like, am I able to fully release the resistance I have about this situation right
I know,
now?
I totally
Yeah.
know that
So I
that's what you
wanted to
meant.
make sure.
Yes, yeah.
But I love that you brought this up, this idea of like unacceptable behavior, right? Like this is
Mhm.
unacceptable behavior. And understanding the difference, like the behavior is just information telling me what's going on internally. So
Yeah.
that's why if you can separate the behavior from the child, because sometimes we label like they're rude or they're doing this behavior and it means this about the child, then
Mhm.
yeah, it gets really complicated because now like it's one and the same, but it's like the behavior is information. It's like an SOS signal saying, I'm in trouble in here. Can you help me? I'm being really rude
Yeah.
and unkind because I'm completely dysregulated and I'm really upset and I don't know what to do. And that helps me.
I totally agree with you. I have a mentor, Ross Green, who teaches collaborative and proactive solutions, a model of collaborative problem solving. And he talks about behavior as a symptom
Yeah.
and not the root cause. And I really like that framework. And it's exactly what you're saying. It's information. Just like when a person has the flu, influenza, they might get a fever. That's a symptom. The fever is not the illness. The fever is not the root cause. We might treat the fever by giving you Tylenol or another, fever suppressant or anti-inflammatory, but that won't treat influenza, right? And so we're talking about getting to the root cause and separating those things. Just like when a child is dysregulated and hitting their sibling, the Tylenol, the ibuprofen in the moment is getting in between them, saying, I can't let you hit your sister. Let me help you get your body safe. Sweet sister, let me help you get your body safe. That's treating the thing. And then it's all what's underneath is kind of what you're asking folks to accept, and so I think that really piecing that apart is really helpful, where no one is asking you to accept your child hitting your other child, right? We're asking you to accept that they have things going on under the surface that is leading to the hitting. And of course, we can't let the hitting happen. We have to be working on giving other, outlets for anger or frustration, other ways of expressing those things. But the underlying anger, frustration, dysregulation, tiredness, those are the things that we can accept that that's where the kid is. And then we can move towards supporting them. Is that what you mean?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, you said it beautifully. And I love using the Tylenol analogy and just the surface versus underneath. And it's
Yeah.
beautiful because that I feel like is the thing that if more conversations were had about that, because it's just an understanding. We just need to understand what we're accepting and that we're not
Yeah.
just passive. It's very active, actually, like you were saying at the beginning, it's a very active process of accepting the human, the person, while setting a limit on the behavior to create safety.
Mm-hmm.
It's necessary. I always say limits create safety. They can create boundaries and clarity around what is allowed and what's not allowed in a situation, but they aren't necessarily the thing that's going to create healing or significant intrinsic long-term change. But we need both. You absolutely need both tools. So having the right awareness of what we're talking about is super important so that people can integrate it into their life and not feel
Yeah.
Like they're just letting their kids run wild and they have
And
no boundaries.
one of the things too that I think is really important to highlight is that on the outside, it can look exactly the same. If you have, two parents, both with two kids, and they're hitting each other, those two parents can do the exact same thing. Get in the middle, separate, make sure that nobody's body is getting hurt. But the energy of the one who's accepting, oh, my kid is really dysregulated, they haven't had their snack yet, who's kind of acknowledging all of those things, is drastically different than the energy of the one who's saying, gosh, my kid is just in this hitting phase. He's a hitter. I never thought I'd raise a hitter. Like the energy, the mindset is really different, even though the actions might look exactly the same on the surface.
Exactly. Yeah. I talk about the fuel, right? We want clean fuel versus, if you put dirty fuel into your car, it might get you where you want to go, but it's not going to be as helpful for the longevity of the car, And so it's exactly what you're saying. And it goes back to that, the mirror neurons and sending out those messages and the mapping that our kids do. Yeah. It definitely makes a difference. The beliefs behind the emotions and the beliefs behind the actions we take, they matter.
And it feels better to us. I was just talking with a parent about how she came into my membership community because she's realized that the respectful parenting kind of tactics that have gotten her to age 5 are starting to not feel good anymore because her child's getting bigger, getting stronger. She's having to use a little bit more force. And it's just, she's learning she needs new strategies. Like it feels different to come in from a place of, oh, I see you with compassion and grace. I see you're having a hard time and I can't let you hit your sister. And so I'm coming in here and moving you away versus I need to get control of my child. This is unacceptable behavior. You can't do this. The love that comes out of our hands when we lovingly move a child away versus the frustration and the tension in our fingers as we frustrate it, and we've all probably, had moments where we've maybe been too frustrated and should have gone and taken a breath instead of interacting, but it feels different to us too. There's a qualitative difference.
And it feels so different to the child.
Yeah.
There's a safety. If we want them, I always use want to listen to us. It's one thing to get a child to listen to you. You can do that through force. You can do that through manipulation. You can do that lots of ways. But to get them to want to listen to you, I believe, and I'd love to have you comment on this. This is my belief, is that I believe that requires a regulated nervous system, a clear, compassionate understanding of what's actually going on with the child, space for them to be messy, for us to be able to create a relationship that's so trusting and strong that we can, in the same scenario, both say, I unconditionally love and accept you, and nothing you can do would ever change that. And this behavior I'm going to put a limit on this behavior. It's not something we're going to do right now. And to be able to communicate both messages simultaneously allows the attachment to stay strong, them to not react to our activated nervous system, because that's often what's happening is one of the parties is, having an activated nervous system. So the natural tendency is we react in kind, and then we just, the tug of war ensues and it ramps just escalates from there. Yeah. But when we refuse to engage in the tug of war, they might be so activated and so frustrated and so disappointed by something or whatever the child is. And if we can show up, and what you're describing is a regulated nervous system, because we have the correct understanding of developmentally what's going on with them, emotionally what's going on with them, and I'm sending out a signal of love and acceptance while setting a limit, like that changes everything. And now they get the opportunity to respond to us in that scenario. And so many parents I've worked with will come back and say, you will not believe this. And I'm it's so cute. They're like, you will not believe this. But the other night, my child was doing XYZ. And all I did was I just set the limit and I sat with them in the chair. And within 5 minutes, like it was done. And they had cried, they had felt their emotions fully through. And I call it the mad to sad trip. Like they resist and then they get sad and they surrender and they complete the emotional cycle, right? The child's back to regulated. The parent is regulated. And then what happens is the capacity for love and attachment and trust I feel like you get double the return on those
Yeah.
scenarios, because I think if the child can trust you when they're at their worst, then their nervous system says, this is a really safe person. You can bring them anything and they will be there for you. And it's just this ripple effect. It changes the experience for everyone involved. And it really feels like magic, because we've been taught it's what we do and it's what we say. And it's really what we feel and what we think that then generates the do and the say. But, like that's what matters. And then, but like you said, it could look on the outside the exact same.
Yeah.
But on the inside, there's no similarities between what's going on.
And like you said, the child's experience of it is radically different. That was a beautiful explanation. Thank you for sharing that with us.
You're so welcome.
Oh, I really love this conversation.
Me too. Yes.
I want to make sure that folks are able, folks listening to my podcast are able to find yours and vice versa.
Find yours. Yes, for sure.
So my podcast is The Balanced Parents. You can listen anywhere you get your podcast. I love to have, anybody who's listening to Andy's podcast, you'll feel right at home.
You're going to love her. Yeah, you're going to love that one.
Yeah. And what about you, Andy?
So mine is Connect Method Parenting. I tried to keep it super simple. Same name as my book. Yeah. And ditto, if you're listening to this on my podcast, you're going to love all the stuff that you're going to hear over on Laura's podcast. So yeah, I feel like we have the same purpose, mission to go out and help get this information out to parents. And
I so agree. It's really lovely finding colleagues. I don't know how you feel, but working online like this can feel quite lonely at times. I miss my colleagues in academia. That's the one thing about academia, about being a professor, that I really miss, is being able to just like walk down the hall and geek out about child development with someone. So it's really nice to get to connect with you, Andy. And I hope we can do this again.
Oh, me too. We'll have to do a few more. I feel like we could have gone down a few other rabbit holes, but we tried to keep it to acceptance. But I hope we did good again and go.
I think we did really good.
Yeah, go explore some of those other things that I was tempted, but I'm like, stay on the train, stay on the train. Yeah, this was really lovely. And I feel the same way. It's beautiful to collaborate online with someone who's like-minded and shared mission. And really, I think what we both want is just to empower more parents to feel like they are capable of bringing this kind of parenting into their home, and to feel how amazing it feels, even though it might feel a little scary at first.
Yeah. It's no joke. It's hard work. It's intense.
Yeah.
It's hard work, but it's good work. And it feels so good to know that you're doing it. And a lot of us are hoping that if we do this work now, our kids will have less work to do. They'll have their own work, but maybe a little bit less.
Maybe a little less because of us.
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah, okay. But life brings it all. So they get the whole experience.
They'll get their own experience, right?
Yeah.
Andy, thank you again.
So much. Yeah, thank you too. This is so wonderful. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, come check out League, my Connect Method parenting coaching program, where we take this material and we apply it using my proven formula. Head over to cmp.works/join.